When the first gunshots echoed along the Ukrainian border, the world seemed to know the outcome in advance. A massive military superpower facing a small nation exhausted by years of political and economic strain. Russian forces advanced with thousands of tanks, squadrons of modern aircraft, and the belief that victory was only a matter of time. Against such overwhelming strength, Ukraine appeared capable of holding out only day by day, hour by hour, amid a sea of fire and devastation. But then, in the darkness of despair, something no one expected happened. From research facilities buried deep underground, a top-secret program was activated, a technology kept hidden for years, known only to a small group of engineers and military specialists. No one, not even Ukraine's closest allies, knew exactly what it was. What is certain is that from the moment this secret weapon appeared on the battlefield, the rhythm of the war changed completely. Russian convoys suddenly lost communication, radar systems went blind, and their attacks fell into a void. Questions began to rise. What had Ukraine done? What were they using that could make an empire once thought invincible begin to falter? And, most importantly, who truly stood behind the technology capable of changing the entire world? No one knows exactly when the project began. Some sources claim it started after 2014, when Crimea was annexed, the moment Ukraine realized that without gaining a technological edge, it would never stand a chance of surviving a full-scale war with Russia. Amid national turmoil, a small group of scientists, military engineers, and artificial intelligence specialists were gathered in secret. The project had no official name, only a cold-coded designation, K-19. Their research facility was buried deep underground, hundreds of kilometers from Kyiv, disguised as an abandoned power plant. Every member of the team signed a strict secrecy agreement, no contact with family, no leaving the compound during the entire research period. They knew they were creating something that could alter the global balance of power, but also something that could plunge the world into chaos if it ever fell into the wrong hands. K-19 was not a traditional weapon. It fired no bullets, launched no missiles, but struck in another way through data, electromagnetic waves, and artificial intelligence. The goal was to build a war neural network, an AI system capable of learning, predicting, and neutralizing enemy operations in real time. Rather than merely defending, the system could adapt to the battlefield, memorizing Russian behavior, analyzing tactics, and counterattacking before any human command could be given. The inspiration for this technological weapon came from Ukraine's early experiences with cyber warfare. The country had once been the victim of countless Russian cyber attacks, its power grid, banks, even hospitals crippled. But instead of collapsing, they learned. Hackers who had fought Russia in the shadows were recruited into the research team. They brought real combat experience in cybersecurity, while the AI engineers provided the power to turn raw data into an invisible weapon. When those two worlds merged, what emerged was not just technology, but an artificial intelligence of war. The project's funding was almost entirely opaque. Money flowed from unknown sources, part from the defense budget, part from secret contributions by Western tech corporations eager to test AI's power in real combat. As a result, K-19 existed in a gray zone between military and civilian, between reality and legend. At the center of the project stood Dr. Olena Kurilenko, an AI specialist who had once worked for a tech company in the United States. She was summoned back to Ukraine just months before the war began. Under Olena's guidance, the AI system was trained on millions of battlefield data points, from radio signals and satellite imagery to the movement patterns of Russian troops. With each simulated attack, the system learned, growing smarter, faster, and more unpredictable. By late 2021, K-19 had completed its first stage, the ability to identify and strike at vulnerabilities in enemy command networks. Yet it had never been tested in the real world until the war erupted. When the first missile struck Kyiv, the research team received a direct order from the highest level: activate K-19. None of them knew that this decision would change not only the course of the war, but the history of modern warfare itself. From deep underground, amid the blue glow of server rooms, an artificial intelligence awakened, and the world was about to witness a weapon no empire had ever faced before. The mystery of the weapon, invisible to the eye, is a complex, multi-layered architecture designed to operate like a living organism. Rather than relying on a single mechanism, the system blends multiple modes: signal collection, real-time analysis, selective jamming, and automated responses to disrupt an adversary's operational chain without firing a single round. At the sensor layer, the system functions like a distributed sensory network. It fuses data from public sources, satellite imagery, open-source intelligence streams, local sensors, cameras, microphones, motion detectors, and intercepted electronic emissions, radio transmissions, radar signatures, communication traffic. The key is not gathering the most data, but integrating those disparate sources into a unified operational picture, a behavioral map of the enemy. AI is tasked with filtering noise, recognizing repetitive patterns in movement, command structures, and vulnerabilities revealed through behavior. Once sufficient patterns are learned, the AI layer runs two capabilities in parallel: prediction and selective intervention. The predictive component uses deep learning models to forecast an adversary's next moves based on historical actions, terrain, and the state of information. This is not vague guesswork, but the comparison of millions of simulated scenarios to identify high-probability options. The intervention layer, rather than attacking physically, operates on the informational and electromagnetic plane. Targeted jamming fragments, communication channels temporarily, injected false data deceives automated recognition systems, and data ghosts fabricated signals mimic convoy movements or fort locations. All actions are tactical and focused, intended to force the adversary into wrong decisions or to delay their actions. A special layer bridges software with autonomous hardware. Fleets of sensors and small robots, from UAVs to mobile stations, can be orchestrated by AI to reposition, create decoy sensors, or capture hostile signal sources. These platforms run on goal-programmed modes with strict human-imposed limits designed to support electronic warfare and intelligence collection, not to autonomously carry out destructive acts. The interplay between analytic software and physical platforms lets the system both see and act within the information environment. Notably, the attacks do not cause immediate physical destruction. Their power lies in paralyzing command chains, breaking synchronization among units, and inducing information panic. When the system deprives an enemy of reliable communication or feeds them corrupted data, tactical decisions slow and grow error-prone. The cumulative effect: disrupted tempo, mistakes, chaotic withdrawals can produce battlefield shifts far greater than the impact of any single event. What sets the system apart is continuous learning. Every interaction with the adversary refines the model. If the opponent changes communication frequencies, the system does not rely on manual reconfiguration. It detects shifts in patterns, simulates new responses, and proposes or automatically deploys, depending on mode, countermeasures. Precisely because of this adaptability, safety measures are paramount: human-controlled intervention limits, no-go zones for behaviors that could harm civilians, and emergency shutdown mechanisms to prevent error propagation. Strategically, the system's effect is not merely to disable equipment but to manipulate belief within the opponent's ranks to make the information they rely upon untrustworthy. Once confidence in information collapses, even the most powerful army can lose its bearings. This is why a data-driven weapon can defeat a large military apparatus. It attacks the essence of power, the ability to orient and coordinate action. Finally, the system is built with resilient defense in mind: layered cyber protections, data distribution strategies, and encryption modes to prevent exploitation. And while this technology reshapes the battlefield in our story, it also raises profound ethical and legal questions about the limits of warfare today. No one in the Ukrainian military knew exactly what was coming. They received only a terse order from a top-secret command: hold position, do not fire. Observe. In the darkness that blanketed the Donbass, dozens of Russian armored columns were crawling along the strategic road linking the front lines to their rear. Above them, Russian reconnaissance drones swept the sky, sending back imagery detailed down to the last element. A full-scale assault seemed to be measured only in minutes. Then, in an instant, everything went quiet. The control screens in Russian command centers suddenly went dark. UAV feeds vanished. Communications across units were severed simultaneously, as if someone had cut the entire network at once. Officers scrambled to restore links, but the systems returned falsified information. Maps showing the positions of Russian forces as if they were deep inside Ukrainian territory. Some tanks received orders to withdraw, while others were directed to advance in completely wrong directions. In a few short minutes, a tightly choreographed attacking formation dissolved into chaos. On the other side of the line, Ukrainian soldiers watched a scene they had never imagined possible. The massive armored convoys stalled in the open fields, engines idling uselessly, then spun in place. Some tanks collided while trying to find a route. Russian artillery did not fire even though targets were in plain sight. The command system seemed to have been blinded. Not a single Ukrainian shot was fired, yet the entire enemy formation had been struck by an invisible blow. Within 15 minutes, K-19 began deploying secondary responses. Radio signal data allowed the system to pinpoint the exact field command centers. Rather than mounting a physical strike, it sent deceptive signals that convinced enemy coordinators they were being encircled from 3 directions. Panic spread. Some commanders independently ordered retreats to preserve forces, leaving a trail of abandoned vehicles along the road. The scene looked as if the enemy were fighting ghosts of their own making. Frontline Ukrainian troops began to understand that what they were witnessing was not magic but the result of unprecedented technology. The secret weapon did not kill with firepower so much as it induced loss of control. By dawn, Russian convoys tens of kilometers long were fragmented. Many vehicles ran out of fuel after losing logistical contact. Artillery units fired at incorrect coordinates, sending shells into their own formations. Some Russian generals called Moscow in alarm, reporting they were confronted with a type of warfare never seen before. As the sun rose, Western reconnaissance satellites started to capture the first images of the disintegration. There were no cratered battlefields, no signs of fierce fighting, only scattered Russian vehicles abandoned along the route. The Russian Ministry of Defense issued a statement calling it a technical malfunction, but international analysts quickly noticed the oddities. Every failure occurred at the same time, in the same area, and subsided after a few hours, exactly how a controlled electronic warfare system would operate. In Kyiv, the K-19 operations team remained silent. No celebrations, only the hum of servers running in the deep bunker. They monitored the cascade of events, a flood of Russian signals showing reorganization in disarray. The artificial intelligence began learning from those reactions, logging new frequencies and communication methods preparing for the next cycle. They knew the system grew smarter with each activation. The impact of the victory was as psychological as it was material. For months, Ukrainian soldiers had grown accustomed to being pressured, forced to retreat step by step. But after that night, everything flipped. News of the invisible strike spread through the ranks and bolstered morale. People started to believe that Russia was no longer an invincible machine. On the other side, confusion spread like a virus. Commanders distrusted one another, fearing insiders or network breaches. Sleepless nights followed in the barracks, as no one could be sure whether orders were genuine or forged. Within 3 days, Russian forces withdrew from 3 strategic sectors without direct combat. International military experts were still struggling to understand what had actually happened. Some hypothesized that NATO had supplied Ukraine with advanced electronic jamming technology. Others believed Ukraine had developed its own military AI system. Those who were involved understood better. This was only K-19's opening act, the first time an artificial intelligence stepped onto the battlefield and rewrote the rules of warfare. The system's power did not stem from destructive capacity, but from total information control. When an enemy loses the ability to see, hear, and trust its own data, it fights in the dark. And in that darkness, Ukraine, a small nation long considered disadvantaged, found a way to make an empire tremble. News of the Donbass incident reached Moscow within hours, accompanied by reports so contradictory they bordered on absurd. The command network had been completely paralyzed for 23 minutes. Dozens of tanks were abandoned in open fields, and radar systems detected nothing despite perfectly clear skies. At first, the Russian General Staff assumed it was the result of a NATO-backed cyber attack. Yet after rechecking, they found no breach in the central infrastructure. Every disruption had occurred locally, within individual combat units. That realization sent chills down the commanders' spines. It seemed their enemy was using a weapon that defied every existing theory of warfare. That same night, the Russian Ministry of Defense convened an emergency meeting. Generals debated a range of possibilities: microwave weapons, localized electromagnetic pulse, EMP, bombs, even information stealth technologies supplied by the West. But none of the theories held up. Data from monitoring stations showed no unusual electromagnetic surges. All hardware was intact upon inspection. The only certainty was that the entire command chain had frozen, as if an invisible hand had seized control from within. One senior officer, furious, was heard saying, "We're not losing to bullets, we're losing to ghosts." In the following days, Russian high command forbade any battlefield footage or audio from leaking out. But in the age of social media, secrecy doesn't last long. A short video, recorded by a Russian soldier on his phone, spread quickly across Telegram channels. Long columns of tanks idled motionless on a highway, lights flickering wildly, soldiers confused and shouting. The clip was titled, "When the Battlefield Gets Switched Off." Within 24 hours, it had gone viral worldwide. International media erupted. CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, Deutsche Welle, all asked the same question: what kind of technology is Ukraine using? Some analysts dubbed it ghost tech, because there were no visuals, no signals, no traces, only the aftermath. Western military experts compared the phenomenon to classified US and Israeli electronic warfare experiments. But no one had concrete evidence. No interference signals were recorded. No rogue code was detected. It was as if an intelligence system had infiltrated the Russian network, acting autonomously and leaving no footprints. As the world speculated, Russia fell into psychological defense mode. Frontline units were ordered to change frequencies every 3 hours, disable all non-encrypted devices, and even revert to paper-based communication to avoid electronic interference. But these measures crippled operational speed. Attacks were delayed, supply routes faltered, morale plummeted. Generals had to admit they were fighting an enemy they couldn't see. No clear front lines, no sound of artillery, only an expanding fog of uncertainty. Russian intelligence agencies launched parallel investigations. They traced unusual data packets, scanned satellite systems, even detained several IT engineers for collaborating with foreign powers. But the deeper they dug, the more lost they became. The signal anomalies defied physics. In some cases, radar detected dozens of false targets that vanished in seconds. One military scientist later admitted on state television, "If this is Ukrainian technology, then it's crossed the boundary between a weapon and a living intelligence." Across the border, Ukraine remained completely silent. The government neither confirmed nor denied. A defense ministry spokesperson merely stated, "We defend our homeland by any means necessary." That ambiguity only strengthened the ghost tech legend. Online theories multiplied. Some claimed Ukraine had partnered with secret European labs. Others said a self-learning AI had escaped control, or that this was the first test of a new global weapon. Each theory fanned both fear in Russia and fascination worldwide. Under mounting pressure, the Kremlin held a press conference, insisting the battlefield remains under full control. Yet days later, a similar incident occurred in southern Kherson. Russian air defense radars went dark for 2 hours, triggering dozens of missiles to fire at phantom targets. When footage of the rain of rockets into nothingness leaked, international analysts called it the clearest proof yet that Ukraine was deploying a learning, adaptive electronic warfare system. Academics and technologists around the world jumped in. Emergency conferences convened at Oxford, MIT, and Tokyo to discuss AI in real warfare. Ethical questions emerged. If an artificial intelligence can command a battlefield without human input, is it still human warfare? Nations began reassessing their autonomous weapons programs, fearing that the age of invisible war had officially begun. Meanwhile, Russia tried to fight back, announcing the creation of a special committee for electronic warfare countermeasures and pouring billions of rubles into developing its own AI defense system. But these efforts felt like chasing shadows. They didn't even know what they were fighting. Each time they altered communication structures, the unseen system adapted faster. Every hole they patched spawned a dozen new blind spots. Within military circles, a new term emerged: the K-19 effect, the paralysis of a powerful army through misinformation and disconnection, without a single physical strike. That event marked a turning point. The world not only witnessed the collapse of Russia's myth of invincibility, but also realized that warfare had entered a new era, one where victory no longer depended on ammunition, but on intelligent data. And in that shroud of secrecy, Ukraine stayed silent, letting its ghost tech continue to spread through rumor and classified reports, leaving the world both awed and afraid. Before K-19 was activated, Ukraine was clearly the weaker side. They defended city by city, relying on determination and limited Western aid. But after a series of incidents that threw Russian units into chaos, the balance began to shift. What had once been a classified project now became a new strategic foundation, warfare built on information and adaptive speed. Ukraine was no longer reacting to events, it was setting the tempo of the entire battlefield. The first change appeared in the way they used data. Instead of merely defending, K-19 was deeply integrated into the command system, allowing the prediction of Russian troop movements 12 to 24 hours in advance. Every counterattack became a calculation of probability when supply lines would weaken, which zones were radar blind, and which routes could turn into tactical traps. Ukrainian units began to move using a principle of hiding within data, appearing only in places the AI determined to be beyond enemy visibility. The precision was almost surgical, minimal losses, maximum results. At the same time, psychological warfare reached a new level. Once news of the invisible weapon spread through Russian ranks, fear no longer came from artillery shells but from uncertainty itself. Every time a radio signal glitched or a map showed incorrect coordinates, Russian soldiers thought that thing was active again. Some units even retreated without direct confrontation. Ukraine, recognizing the enormous psychological impact, exploited it. They deliberately released small false signals to maintain the illusion that K-19 was everywhere. The enemy couldn't tell what was real and what was deception, and in war, doubt is the deadliest weapon of all. As Russian forces faltered, Ukraine shifted to a methodical counteroffensive. They didn't surge forward, they moved like needles through fabric. AI-guided mobile units navigated the data network of the battlefield, striking only when temporary gaps appeared, zones identified as Russia's information blind spots. Within weeks, once solid defensive lines in the east were torn apart without major clashes. The world watched in astonishment. The nation once seen as desperately holding out was now reclaiming territory at a breathtaking pace. Politically, the ripple effect ran even deeper. Western nations, long hesitant to send heavy weapons, began to believe Ukraine could actually win. Flows of technology, intelligence, and funding surged. This shift in perception from saving Ukraine to partnering with Ukraine reshaped global diplomacy. Kyiv was no longer a petitioner but a respected strategic ally. Major European defense corporations quietly sought collaboration to study the new technology, while military academies began including the K-19 effect in their research curricula. Russia, by contrast, entered a phase of severe instability. The string of failures drained not only resources but confidence within the military elite. Inspections, dismissals, and mutual accusations erupted. Some generals were forced into early retirement, others saw their divisions dissolved. On state media, officials reassured the public that every technology has its countermeasure. But behind closed doors, they knew their enemy possessed something they had not even imagined. Spiritually, the most dangerous thing for any empire is losing the sense of control. When every command can be distorted and every decision manipulated, authority becomes fragile. In Moscow's conference rooms, heated arguments broke out should they escalate into total war or pause to understand this technological threat. But time was no longer on their side. Each day that passed, Ukraine liberated another town, expanding its reach. Remarkably, despite K-19's central role, Ukraine didn't overuse it. They understood that its true strength lay not in destruction, but in controlling the rhythm of war. By mastering information, they mastered time and direction. The faster Russia reacted, the easier it was for the system to predict and counter them. This was the inversion of history itself. Initiative, once the privilege of the powerful, now belonged to the smaller, more agile nation. From that point on, the Russia-Ukraine war was no longer a contest of tanks and artillery, but a duel between human intellect and artificial intelligence. And in that struggle, a once mighty empire began to crumble. not because it lost territory, but because it lost faith in its own control. The balance of power shifted not through one decisive battle, but through thousands of moments when Ukraine forced its enemy to walk through fog while it alone could see the path ahead. The Russia-Ukraine war has entered a new chapter, one where technology is no longer just a tool but the force reshaping history itself. The emergence of K-19, a secret system developed by Ukraine, has not only transformed the battlefield but sent a powerful message to the world. In the age of artificial intelligence, true strength lies not in size, but in creativity and adaptability. Ukraine has proven that even a small nation, armed with knowledge, can make an empire bow before human intellect. But this story isn't over. A larger question remains. Is K-19 merely the beginning of a new era of warfare where machines and data replace human decision-making? And if technology can save a nation, could it one day also destroy humanity? If this story made you think, leave a comment below. What do you believe the future of warfare looks like? What role will AI play in shaping global power? Don't forget to hit subscribe for more deep analyses on military secrets, technology, and the strategies shaping our modern world. And if you believe Ukraine's lesson that intelligence and willpower can triumph over brute strength is one worth remembering, share this video to spread that message. Every share is a step toward uncovering the truth behind war and technology, a journey we're all part of.